if I get caught in fantasizing about the future, like, oh, I'm going to be on vacation in 2 weeks. Oh, it's going to be so amazing. In this moment, I'm actually causing myself suffering.
Welcome to the NWI Podcast, brought to you by the National Wellness Institute. I'm your host, Carlson, and this is the podcast for wellness professionals and enthusiasts who want to amplify the quality of their lives in all 6 dimensions of wellness. Don't worry about taking notes. I'll do that for you. And you can find them at nwipodcast.org. This episode is brought to you by NWI's Worksite Wellness Specialist Program. NWI's Worksite Wellness Specialist Program is a premier training program for worksite wellness, human resources, benefits, and interdisciplinary professionals. Earn your Worksite Wellness Specialist Certificate this January in Florida at the pre-conference for the Health Benefits Conference and Expo. This year's HBCE conference is in beautiful Clearwater Beach, Florida at the Sheraton Sand Key Resort. Get the knowledge, skills, and tools you need to create and sustain a culture of wellness within your organization. Continuing education credits for this certificate will be administered by the National Wellness Institute. Go to nationalwellness.org/HBCE pre-conference to get more information and register. That's nationalwellness.org/HBCE pre-conference. Judson Brewer, MD, Ph.D., is a thought leader in the field of habit change and the science of self-mastery. Having combined over 20 years of experience with mindfulness training with his scientific research team, he is the Chief of the Division of Mindfulness, Director of Research at the Center of Mindfulness, and Associate Professor in Medicine and Psychiatry at UMass Medical School. He is also a research affiliate at MIT. He has published numerous peer-reviewed articles and book chapters, trained U.S. Olympic coaches, and his work has been featured on 60 Minutes, was the 4th most viewed TED Talk of 2016 with over 8 million views, Time Magazine, Top 100 New Health Discoveries of 2013, Forbes, BBC, NPR, Al Jazeera in a documentary about his research, Business Week, and others. A psychiatrist and internationally known expert in mindfulness training for addictions, Brewer has developed and tested novel mindfulness programs for habit change, including both in-person and app-based treatments for smoking, emotional eating, and anxiety. He has also studied the underlying neural mechanisms of mindfulness using standard and real-time fMRI and EEG neurofeedback. His work has been funded by the National Institutes of Health and American Heart Association, among others. Dr. Brewer founded Claritas Mind Sciences to move his discoveries of clinical evidence behind mindfulness for eating, smoking, and other behavior change into the hands of consumers. He is the author of The Craving Mind, From Cigarettes to Smartphones to Love, Why We Get Hooked and How We Can Break Bad Habits. Dr. Brewer, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Caroline. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you here.
Great. I'm excited too.
Thanks. And you have a wonderful book that I've completely worn to a frazzle.
That's the biggest compliment an author could ever get.
Is it really?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I bring you with me to the gym and I have the audiobook and then I've got the highlighter going with a paper book, the hardback, and I absolutely love this book.
That is awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. I'm smiling. You can't see me smiling, but maybe you can hear it.
I can hear you smiling. I can. So you don't get people saying, I'm addicted to your book.
That would be awesome.
I'm guessing that's the one addiction you might just say.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell me then, I have to ask the question now that I've been through this book. Do you have any remaining addictions?
What does that mean?
I know, but I figure you can probably, it's like you've discovered how to get rid of the kryptonite. So now you're like Superman and you can just decide which things you want to keep in your life and everything else just jettison, right? Maybe you don't want to tell me your kryptonite.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I certainly have plenty of addictions, but they just don't have the same grip over me.
Yes.
And I can't say that I'm forming new ones besides awareness. Like awareness just gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. And I haven't seen any side effects to paying attention yet.
Well, that's good. So please tell our listeners something about you personally, about how you got involved in researching mindfulness as a way to conquer craving.
Well, if I'm an expert in anything, I would have to say it's suffering, as in my own suffering. I've racked up so many hours of suffering, it's not even funny. So I can certainly say that I've come to this honestly and painfully.
Yeah, I was actually very interested in the chapter in the book where you talked about suffering and joy and how most people confuse the two.
Yeah, especially this piece of excitement where, it can seem like anticipation of the next big thing, whether it's chocolate or cookies or movie or date or kiss or whatever, seems to be the best thing in life. And in fact, we haven't actually tasted things that are sweeter.
Yeah. Well, I think this is very exciting research. When I read your book, I was really excited because I saw so many correlations between your research of how we can free ourselves from behaviors that cause us stress simply by being aware of what we're doing as opposed to trying to control or fix a situation. And this correlation of awareness and letting go of results caused me to mention your book, The Craving Mind, separately to two different 12-steppers. People in 12-step programs, whether it be Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, where they follow the 12-step theory of recovery. I assumed that they would really agree with your book and the research, and I was very surprised instead that both of the people I spoke to got a bit fired up, claiming, well, those who haven't been there can never truly understand the addiction struggle, especially a doctor.
I've been there.
Yeah. They really appeared to be very possessive of their struggle. And it led me to think, well, golly, I mean, the first time I got that response, I thought, well, gee, that's weird. So I went and asked another person that I know, and I got the same response. And they were somewhat indignant. And I thought, I wonder if Dr. Brewer has experienced this kind of resistance when speaking to a person who's struggling to overcome an addiction. I mean, this is your profession, but that response really shocked me.
It's a great question. And in fact, so one addiction I have not had, fortunately, is being addicted to cigarettes. And it was really important to really own that when I started my first mindfulness training program for smoking and when we started our first clinical trials. And I would invariably get the question on the first group, have you ever smoked? Because these are folks that had been coming in and they'd tried to quit 5 or 6 times. And here's this white privileged guy coming in, at Yale telling them how to quit smoking. And, they really wanted to see if I had street creds. And I said, okay, by the end of this class, so not by the end of the course, but the end of the class, if you don't believe that I truly can relate to addictions, then call me out on it. Nobody ever called me out because even though I haven't smoked cigarettes, I truly have had plenty of addictions and can certainly relate to it. And we all, we were all getting along very, very well by the end of the first class because it's a craving is a craving is a craving. And, because somebody, just because I haven't smoked doesn't mean I don't know what addiction is. And I think that's true for all of us. If we haven't had some classical addiction, it doesn't mean that we can't relate to the addiction experience.
Yes. I mean, thank God you can relate because you seem to have really made a breakthrough here that can help millions of people if they will listen. So why is it that often people who are able to conquer drug addictions from substances such as heroin and cocaine find themselves unable to quit smoking in particular? Yeah,
it's interesting. Smoking is actually the hardest addiction to quit. And there are a number of just basic facts that back that up. It might seem paradoxical, but it's largely because it's not sexy enough to make movies about people dying slowly of emphysema.
It's sad that people are still, even occasionally now being featured in movies, still smoking.
Smoking. I know.
Surprising.
It seems like there's a resurgence
Yeah.
there where it's really unfortunate because it glamorizes
It does.
Yeah. So just taking smoking as an example, smoking, for example, so the lung, uh, with all of the capillary beds, all of the little blood vessels in the lungs, if you take them and you lay them out on a flat area, they have the surface area of almost a football field.
Wow.
So there's this huge amount of surface area in the lungs, which is, from a drug's perspective, a wonderful drug delivery vehicle because you can get a very rapid absorption of a drug through your lungs very quickly. And the more there's a direct correlation between brain dopamine levels and the rapidity in which nicotine is absorbed into the blood. So smoking is a great way to get people addicted to cigarettes because there's this rapid rise in dopamine. Same is true this is why crack cocaine is more addictive than snorted cocaine.
Wow. Well,
there is hope. There is hope.
Okay, so in your book, The Craving Mind, you state that all cravings eventually subside. And, here we're talking about this tremendous addiction of smoking, and that people feel, hey, I can get past heroin, but don't take away my cigarettes. And you're saying that all we have to do to conquer cravings ultimately is wait them out. To quote you, a craving is just a craving unless we get sucked into it, as you were really just saying. Please explain what that means.
Yeah. And this is not to say that this process is easy. For all of us that have had addictions, the process of breaking an addiction, especially one that's been long-lived, it can be challenging and it can take a long time. So what I would argue is that it's a simple process, yet it's not necessarily easy. We can make the process simpler and easier for ourselves. And often we are getting in our own way when we're trying to change a habit. So for example, and I don't know how many people have come into my office saying, oh man, I feel like these cravings are going to last forever. And, whether it's a cigarette or a food craving or something else, in that moment is a great opportunity to really not even step back, but step forward into this and see, what is this exactly that constitutes a craving? I'm thinking of a patient who came in and he said, "Doc, I feel like my head's going to explode if I don't smoke." So right then, that feeling of head exploding can be monumental because it can feel so big and so heavy. But in fact, if we break it down into its constituent elements, like what does head exploding feel like? And we actually did this. He said, "Oh, it's tightness. Where's the tightness? Oh, it's in my chest. It's burning, it's clenching, it's whatever." Started to see, these were physical sensations. And as we went through each physical sensation, it's like, well, is that going to make your head explode? Well, and it's tightness. It's not pleasant, but my head's not going to. Oh, okay. Well, what about the restlessness? Well, it's restlessness. It's not pleasant, but it's, my head's not going to explode. And you just see this aha start to come over him. Where it's like, oh, these are physical sensations. Oh, oh, wow. And then we just kind of walked him through just kind of naming those or labeling them out loud. And then he's like, oh, this one comes and goes. Oh, this one comes and goes. Oh, this one comes and goes. Oh, wait a minute. They all come and go. Huh.
Yeah.
That's a critical piece.
So the key to conquering those cravings has more to do with really relaxing and letting go and being just in the awareness of them than it does trying to have self-control and acquire something to control them?
Yes. So I think that the self-control is something that we've all tried. It's like, if only I could just force myself not to eat the cookie or to smoke the cigarette. Well, if that worked, none of us would smoke or overeat. This cognitive control part of our brain is the youngest from an evolutionary perspective, and it's the first that goes offline. Surprise! When we get stressed out or hungry. And when do we smoke and when do we eat? When we're stressed out and hungry. So it's not reliable. Yet we can step back into this process and if we know that our willpower, our cognitive control power of our brain isn't trustworthy, we can step back and see, well, what is trustworthy? Well, awareness is pretty trustworthy because it's always available. It's just a matter of turning it toward our experience. And then there's this other piece, curiosity. So let me ask you this question. This is unscripted, so you have no idea what I'm going to ask.
Go for it.
If I asked you, put it in a category, pleasant or unpleasant, what does craving feel like? Which category would you put it in?
It's hard to say because it's anticipatory of getting that thing.
Yeah, but that's the anticipation. Don't think about getting that thing. What does the craving itself feel like?
Okay.
If you had to put it in one category, pleasant or unpleasant?
Unpleasant.
Yeah, that's universal.
It feels restricting.
Yeah, and it says do something. I need my thing.
Yeah,
right?
as my mother would say, she's from New England, by the way, like a cat on a hut tin roof.
Yes, not so pleasant. So how about curiosity? Unpleasant or pleasant?
I think curiosity is a very open feeling. I would classify that as pleasant.
Yeah, even the tone of your voice says that when you're probably just, trying that on. So in the moment that we have a craving, if we turn curiosity to that craving, we can actually flip the valence from unpleasant craving to, oh, what does this feel like? And even if it doesn't like magically transform it, we can actually start to open to it right in that moment and start to tap into the joy that comes from being even a little bit curious. I'm
getting visions of Ralph Cramden trying to learn to golf, saying, hello, ball. I'm saying, hello, craving.
Yes. Hello, craving. But just imagine that. It's like instead of trying to run away from the cravings or corner them off or suppress them, we paradoxically say, hey, craving, let me get to know you a little bit. How bad are you?
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of corner you now and ask a question. Mm-hmm. Based on that, so now we're turning towards the craving. But you talk about when we repeat habits that we're creating grooves in our brain circuitry, making that behavior the more likely path to follow. So that in effect, when we say we're getting stuck in a rut, that we're actually creating those ruts that we're getting stuck in, literally in our own brains, by repeating patterns. So how do you address the craving for something without getting sucked into thinking about the something and reinforcing the rut?
It's a great question. So the something itself can be very seductive, and we get lost in that. In those moments, if we can turn toward that actual feeling of the urge or the want, that's where we have the opportunity to step out and stop grooving that, right?
Okay.
And as part of that, the first place to give us a little bit of a momentum to get out of that rut is to simply ask ourselves, well, what do I get from this? What is this giving me? So, for example, with cigarettes, we have people go ahead and smoke. And then we have them pay attention as they smoke. So they're in the groove of smoking a cigarette. Yet we're bringing this twist where we say, just pay attention to the results of your behavior. What's it actually feel like in this moment? And, shock of all shocks, cigarettes don't actually taste very good. And when people notice this, they start to see, oh, this is not that great. And they start to become disenchanted with their behavior simply by paying attention. So it helps them kind of pop out of that groove simply by seeing that it's not as rewarding as they used to think it was. So it updates there's this whole value system in our brain that kind of catalogs, which rewards are the great rewards and which ones are less rewarding. Well, these get laid down as, oh, this is a good thing. But when we really pay attention, we can see, oh, it's not as great as I thought. And it kind of devalues it, not in an artificial or thinking way, but an actual embodied experiential way. So that we develop this wisdom that says, oh, smoking, why am I going for that smoke? Or, the last time I ate 6 cupcakes or a whole sleeve of Oreos,
I don't know what you're talking about.
So hypothetically speaking, we can remember, oh, it was a gut bomb. It did not feel very good. That helps us to wake up, see that we're in that groove, and say, do I really want to do this again?
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about a difference between, say, the consciously thinking about something with, say, your prefrontal cortex, right? And you're thinking about, well, I know in my head I shouldn't eat this cupcake, versus letting go of it and basically being able to not focus on thoughts of the cupcake but the experience of how does that make me feel? So you can turn away from thinking directly about the thing you want and the obsessive thinking and be more of the experiential understanding that that's not going to benefit you.
Yes, and because I would say, and we can actually turn toward the obsessive thinking and see, what do I get from this?
Okay.
In a non-cognitive way. So what does it feel like when I'm stuck? Like worry is a great example. I've had a number of patients in our unwinding anxiety program actually, where it's like we're helping them first to map out what their habit loops are. What's triggering my anxiety, what's triggering my worry, and what do I get from worry? And it's amazing what they discover. They're like, oh, worry. I used to think, that worry was helping me control something, but I'm starting to realize that it doesn't. It just makes it worse.
Right. I'm not going to be more prepared.
Yeah. So this moves from this knowledge, like thinking, as you mentioned, into this wisdom where we actually know it in our bones, and learning it from our own direct experience rather than like some, I shouldn't, whatever.
Yes. So knowledge and wisdom being two different parts of your brain almost.
Yeah. I think of knowledge as supporting wisdom, but there ain't nothing that beats wisdom. And you can't get wisdom through osmosis. You can't get wisdom from a book. That comes from roll up your sleeves, get your feet dirty, whatever. That just comes from direct experience. Period.
Darn it, doctor! I highlighted the heck out of your book. I have spent more
in the support of wisdom. That knowledge is helpful.
It's helpful.
Now put it to use.
Yeah. So what's the problem then with when you talk about worry, with self-referential or me thinking?
What's wrong with it?
Yeah. How does that cause problems when you're mentioning worry and really somebody kind of ruminating on, all right, I'm going to think about this thing I've got to do and all of the elements of it and try to sort it out, even though it's not in my control right now. I'm going to just chew on it. Yeah. Is that me thinking?
It sounds quite a bit like it, and there's this is really interesting. There's a quote from somebody with anxiety, and it's really, it's amazing. People can describe this so beautifully. So this person was mapping out her habit loops around anxiety. And so there are three elements. So you need a trigger, something that triggers it, and then the behavior, which tends to be worry, and then the outcome. And so I'm just going to quote one of our unwinding anxiety members. She said, "I'm starting to think that over the years I've tricked myself into believing that anxiety is productive, even a reward. A thought about work arises," and she put in parentheses, trigger. "I jump into worrying or distraction, parentheses, behavior, and I get more anxiety as a result, parentheses, reward/outcome. During the first few days of this program, I was confused by this loop, and I wondered how anxiety can possibly feel like a reward." She put, "A reward? ? It feels horrible." "But I think I'm onto something. For me, feeling anxious, as horrible as it is, has come to seem like the, quote, right way to feel, the appropriate response to have unfinished tasks ahead of me. After all, it seems logical that this kind of discomfort would lead to productivity."
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? So she starts to see, this is how this whole thing is set up. And I had trained myself, I'd grooved my brain to get anxious when I've got a long to-do list. I'm sure nobody can relate to this.
Yeah, said no one ever.
Right.
I think for me that follows because in my mind I'm thinking if I keep on alert by worrying something over, then I'm not going to just blow it off and forget about it and, go on vacation and just, whatever.
Yeah.
It keeps me on high alert and ready to tackle everything.
Right. And so here's the question. Can we still be on alert, but does it have to be high? Does it have to be associated with anxiety? It's like performance anxiety. We learn, a lot of people falsely learned to associate anxiety with a good performance because they were anxious beforehand, and then they had a good performance. And their brain, as an association machine, says, oh, A plus B, it must be causal. No, it's not actually true. It may just have been that you were anxious and you performed well. You have to do the parallel experiment to see, what if you're not anxious? Can you still perform well? And in fact, people perform, surprise, better when they're not anxious.
See, now you have to tell all the football players that they don't have to wear the same dirty, stinky socks that they wear every single game to get their touchdowns.
Right. There's a great example. That's a great example of associative learning. True, and unrelated, as my PhD mentor used to put it.
Yeah. Now, in combating all of this worry and ruminative thinking, you talk about a tool. You say that there is a stress compass that we all have that we can learn to use to guide us into a better way of living. Can you talk about what the stress compass is and how we can learn to read our stress compass?
Sure. I can tell you this, but then I'll have to kill you. No, I'm just kidding.
Might be worth it.
You can edit that out.
I might not.
So here's the thing. Let's actually do another experiment together. When you feel – so just remember a time recently, and anybody that's listening can do this too. Remember a time recently when you felt afraid or anxious. Okay? And when you bring that scenario to mind, now just drop into your body and see where you feel that feeling most. And see if you can point to it with one finger.
Oh, it's right in my sternum.
Okay, I was going to see if I could predict where it is, and I was going to say in your chest. And I was – so great. There was a study that did this exact thing where they induced a bunch of emotions in about 800 people and then found where they were most common. And what they found was in the chest. So whether it's anxiety, whether it's fear, both are really centered most in the chest. And so there's this feeling of contraction, right? So if we feel contracted when we're afraid, which makes sense because, from a protection standpoint, we want to make ourselves as small as possible. We want to guard our vital organs, whatever. But there's this literal feeling of contraction. And so we can feel what contraction feels like. And if we can really feel that, we can start to calibrate one end of our compass, which is, well, let me ask you, does that contraction feel pleasant or unpleasant? Does it feel like more suffering or less suffering?
Definitely more.
Yeah. Okay. So there's the true north of suffering, right? It's a marker that says, oh, here's contraction, here's suffering. Mm-hmm. Now let's take we've been talking about curiosity, and would you say curiosity is contracting or expanding?
Expanding.
Okay, great. How about joy?
Expanding.
Okay, great. So there's the other end of the compass. We can see what it feels like to be contracted. We can see what it feels like to be expanded. And then we can simply map out our experience as we go through our day. What did I do? And does this lead to contraction or expansion?
That's interesting.
Go ahead.
Well, because you mentioned earlier excitement, and excitement to me, even though people get very ebullient, it seems more of a contraction feeling.
Yes. Ding, 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 ding. Because many people, if they don't really know their own experience, they'll at first be like, oh, well, is excitement expanding or contracting?
They mislabel it.
Yes. But excitement says, oh, I'm about to get something, I'm about to do something, which shares many of the same flavors as craving. Oh, I'm about to get something.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I had a friendship in the past with someone that was a probably somewhat addictive relationship in that I thought this is an important relationship, I have to keep this going. But in reality, when the relationship met its inevitable end, I realized that I actually exhaled. Mm. And that whole time I had been kind of like this current of electricity running through my body at all times, where I was always just ready for the next moment of disaster or drama with this person. And it was really an energy drain that I didn't catch it until the end.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like a blanket. We don't know that we're wearing it until we take it off, and we're like, wow.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were talking about the compass and that's our suffering north.
Yes. And then there's our suffering south, as in we can move away from suffering when we find things that lead to expansion. So when we're truly generous with people, I don't know if you read the chapter about learning to be mean and nice.
Oh, I read them all.
Yeah. So that chapter, simply put, is like when we see how painful it is to be a jerk, we're less excited to be jerks in the future. When we see how sweet it tastes to be generous and kind, guess what?
Yeah.
It happens more naturally because it's just there's nothing that beats kindness.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. There was a movie called The Mosquito Coast from 1986, starring Harrison Ford and River Phoenix. And the movie is from the point of view of River Phoenix, talking about his relationship with his dad. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen the movie over the last 30 years. But the son has a very stressful relationship with his father, and they travel into the jungles of Central America on missionary work. And as he matures throughout the movie and becomes more of his own person, he goes from feeling that despite all of their travels, that the world is a very small place. As you reference the constricting feeling, compared with the end of the movie, as he gains his emotional freedom from his father, and he says that the world is endless. Yes,
he's seeing the world through, I would say he's taken off his, we call these subjective bias lenses, these. We as humans get biased based on our previous behaviors, based on our previous actions and how rewarding they are. And so we start to see the world in certain ways. So if his habit loop was, my dad is an amazing guy, and then he saw behaviors that reinforced it, that would just get perpetuated. Or if simply put, we get stressed out, we eat cupcakes, we start seeing the world through, if I'm stressed, I should eat cupcakes glasses. And then we take them off and say, wow, those are dirty glasses. I can't believe, those cupcakes didn't fix anything.
Right. Wow. So let me ask you this. Through your meditation practice, you say that you learned that tuning into a feeling of expansiveness or contraction in your gut helped you to realize that you were getting caught up in your own thoughts. Can you tell us why you say both pleasant and unpleasant ruminations cause the same feeling of tightness or a shrinking equating to craving? Is that really what we just talked about? How if it's a rumination, it's going to have the same result?
Yeah. Well, and that's something we can all explore ourselves. Like when we get caught so the negative ones are easy, right? So It's like, worrying about the future, and that doesn't feel very good. But if I also get caught in fantasizing about the future, like, I'm going to be on vacation in 2 weeks. It's going to be so amazing. In this moment, I'm actually causing myself suffering. One, I'm not actually present to whatever I, might be helpful to be present to. So if I'm driving a car, it might be helpful to pay attention to the road.
Right.
But also that anticipation of being on vacation leads to restlessness in itself. So it's not actually that pleasant. There was a study that was done 2010 where they pinged people through their smartphones and just check to see if people were mind wandering, and about 50% of the time they were. And when they checked in, on average, people, when they were mind wandering, they were less happy than when they were just focused and present with whatever they were doing at the moment. They concluded that the conclusion of that paper literally was, quote, a wandering mind is an unhappy mind, end quote.
Yeah. Now, we talked about the stress compass. What is the cure for getting caught up in our thoughts? Is that the cure?
The nice thing is that we don't need anybody to come in and fix anything for us. Awareness actually is enough, is necessary and sufficient. And I would argue that. And here's what will back that up. So when we become aware, so let me back up and say reward-based learning is based on rewards. So it's not actually the behavior itself that drives subsequent behavior. It's the reward, what we get from it. And if we can start to see that our unhealthy habits, let's say, are not that rewarding, like we used the smoking example, we start to unlearn those habits naturally simply by bringing awareness to them. So those start to unwind on their own. Or if we start to see that, worry thinking is just getting us more caught up in worry, we can become disenchanted with that and start to have that unwind naturally. So awareness can help us unwind our old habits simply by paying attention to the rewards or the results of our behavior. And it can also help us tune into the joys that come from being aware itself and see that, awareness itself feels pretty darn good. I'll give you an example of somebody from our, I think it was from our Eat Right Now program. She said, here you go. She said, I'm trying to figure out what I get out of binging. What's my reward? And she was just pondering this. And about a month later, she wrote in the community, binge eating was my emotional response. Eating took the place of feeling. Feeling was hard. Eating was not. Feeling felt bad. Eating felt good. As I begin to embrace emotions, I'm not as drawn to the fridge and the pantry. Emotions are more real and authentic and can be their own reward. So she's talking about just being with whatever is. She continued, at the end of a binge, I never felt good. When I breathe through the emotional pain or frustration or anger, I feel really good and calm, peaceful even. Now that is a reward. Isn't that amazing? So she's just talking about bringing awareness to her own emotions, seeing that binging makes things worse, and that if she just rests in awareness of the frustration or anger she put it, or the emotional pain, she says, I feel really good and calm, peaceful even. So we can start to see that, awareness can be there. And if we're not caught up in it, awareness isn't sad. Awareness isn't angry. It's just aware. And if we're curious, there can be this curious awareness that's just watching the show. And as we watch, we are not caught up in it and we stop feeding it.
Yes. And it's bringing us to the present moment instead of thinking ahead too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is this what you mean about how shifting from doing to being helps our messes untangle themselves?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. We can be with whatever emotion there is. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to do anything about it. I love real world examples, so I'll give you one more. It's just here. This person who's in our Unwinding Anxiety program, she said, last night, the anxiety kept trying to grab me and pull me under its clutches. I didn't try to fight it or change it. I just kept saying lightly and kindly to myself, thinking, these are just thoughts. I gently said, yes, you have a choice. And I focused my gaze as an observer, not a fixer, on what sensations were happening in my body. I wasn't trying to force or change anything. She put anything in all caps. That was key. And I was able to stay with it and fall asleep several times, I might add, and pretty quickly. She said, wow. Like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. I had the power all along, right inside myself, just by allowing and accepting.
Now that's powerful. Let me ask you, does that work with children? I mean, I know they're little, but if you have a child that has anxiety, especially at night, is that something that can be taught to someone who's, say, younger than 15?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So and there are many programs that are teaching mindfulness to children and teaching them. So I love this. I heard this little tool that I don't remember which child mindfulness program it was, but basically they teach kids to see awareness as the ocean, let's say, and that emotions are like fish. And so if they're looking at an aquarium window, they can watch a fish swim up and then a fish swim away. And they can watch their emotions swim up, like, oh, there's fear, and they can name it, just like, oh, that's a dolphin. Well, dolphin isn't a fish. Oh, that's a whatever fish. And then they can see it swim away, and they can learn that their emotions are just these things that come and go, and that they don't have to do anything, or they don't have to, as this person say, try or force or change anything. They can just say, oh, there's sadness. Oh, there's frustration. Oh, there's whatever, and it comes and goes. So I think with children might even learn this more quickly than adults, because we're all thick-headed thinking we know how to do things, and we get these old habits.
Yeah, we're overthinking it.
Yeah, we are totally an overthinking society.
That's going to be very helpful. Thank you. I'm going to try that. I'll have to let you know how it goes.
And that might work for big kids too, as in over the age of 20.
Good to know.
We can see our emotion fishes.
Yes, that's true. We can all learn from that. Now, I know you have some tools for people to use in their own journey. How can coaches learn to teach others how to read their stress compass and shift their brains out of rumination mode? Do you teach workshops?
We train facilitators.
Okay.
Who can lead what we call flipped classrooms. And a flipped classroom is where you can record your lecture and deliver it at home, and then you do your homework in class. That's why they call it a flipped classroom. So for us, the lecture, quote unquote, the lecture or the didactics is the app. So whether it's emotional eating, like our Eat Right Now program, or anxiety, the Unwinding Anxiety program, individuals can do those at home, and then they come into a weekly group that's facilitated, where they bring their life, which is their homework, and their struggles and their questions, and somebody can help facilitate the process of them kind of waking up and seeing any speed bumps or any hurdles or things like that. And so, at the Center for Mindfulness, we actually have an online training program where we can train people all over the world to facilitate these. But the key starts with one's own direct experience. Okay. So all coaches out there know, and actually some of my meditation teachers gave me the best advice, where they said, when you start teaching, stick to your own experience, and you can't go wrong. Because if you're teaching from your own experience, you're not gonna get caught up in concepts or whatever. This is true for coaching and facilitating. So the advice I give to coaches is start by really calibrating your own system, where you are just absolutely seeing very, very clearly what contraction and what expansion feels like, and mapping out your own habit loops and really understanding your own minds. This is why we make our coaches not only – so we have prerequisites where people have to have a personal mindfulness practice and other things, but also they have to go through these programs themselves, so that they can really experience what it's like to live within them. And it's amazing. We've had very experienced, like mindfulness-based stress reduction teachers go through our programs and just say, I was just taking this facilitation so I could, have another tool in my tool belt, and I never realized how profound it was for me personally. Well, guess what? Those are going to be the best coaches. They're going to be the best folks at facilitating this stuff, because they can teach it from their own wisdom, from their own bones. Yes,
and they have a breakthrough, and then they can tell about that and share how it's helped them personally, and they've got suddenly a personal experience. Yeah.
Yes, it's a fellow journeyman or a fellow journey person, as compared to somebody sitting up on high, saying, do this, do this, do this, saying, oh, what's it like for you? Oh, this is what it's like for me. Oh.
Please tell our listeners about the tools you have developed and where they can find them and how they can get in touch with you.
Great. We've developed programs for smoking cessation. We have a digital therapeutic, which means a fancy name for an app, which is called Craving to Quit, and the website's cravingtoquit.com. We have a program for emotional and stress eating. In fact, one of our studies that was done at UCSF, led by Ashley Mason, the principal investigator there, found a 40% reduction in craving-related eating with our Eat Right Now program. And the website for that is just goeatrightnow.com. And then our most recent one, which I'm just super excited about, because we have people writing out full-blown panic attacks using this program. I was blown away. It's just called Unwinding Anxiety, and they can go to unwindinganxiety.com to learn more about that. And I think they should be able to get any of these from my completely self-referential website name, which is judsonbrewer.com.
Excellent. And I will be making show notes so that our listeners can get those notes at the same point on our website where we will have your audio feed. And they can have a downloadable PDF with links as well.
And of course, the book, you can find the book on Amazon.
I can't recommend the book highly enough. I had so many aha moments that I think I went through 3 highlighter pens.
Yeah, great.
Well, Dr. Brewer, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really enlightening. And
well, thank you. It's been really fun.
Good. I'm glad. It's always a little intimidating to speak with someone who has so much knowledge and expertise in this field. And it's probably kind of like driving in front of a cop, you know, when everybody slows down to 5 miles an hour. And I asked a cop once, I said, does it ever drive you crazy when you're on the road and everybody slows down to about 9 miles an hour in front of you? And he said, it drives me insane. Nobody will drive around me and I can't get anywhere. And he's got the biggest example of road rage that you've ever seen. He says, I just want to lose my mind. People probably sometimes shy away from talking to you. I hate to say that, but they go, he's a psychiatrist and he's an expert and he's going to analyze everything I say.
Well, how about this? You and I are fellow journey people in the realm of suffering. And so in that sense, we are the same.
Well, thank you. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your keynote speech at the National Wellness Conference in 2018 in June. And I can't wait to meet you in person.
Well, thank you. It was really fun. I wasn't kidding.
That's terrific coming from you. I'm honored. And I'll speak with you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the NWI Podcast. Don't forget, you can download the show notes at nwipodcast.org. Registration for the 2018 National Wellness Conference is now open. Early bird rates expire February 16th, 2018. So register today at nationalwellness.org/NWC. Like what you hear? Please leave us a rating on iTunes and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll see you on the next episode. Be well.